Hi you guys. So I am making a training video all about front counter and our front counter positions, which are front counter order taking and hospitality. This is just in depth about how these work. Now that our dining room is opening, we do realize that a lot of our staff haven't really worked our front counter positions, and it requires us, both our new staff and our staff that have been here before COVID, to kind of change our mindset a bit and to get back into old habits that we used to be really good at when working out front. So three main points that I want to go over about front counter. First one being guest interactions, second taking orders, and third is cleaning and stocking. For the first point, guest interactions, this will be the thing that I emphasize the most because it is the most important thing about front counter is those guest interactions. The number one rule with guests is that guests are our first priority. We want to make sure that we are using amazing Core 4 while we're up front. Hopefully you remember what Core 4 is. If you don't, basically it's just the 4 basic attributes of a good Chick-fil-A employee, which are first, eye contact. We want to make sure that we are making good eye contact while we are having interactions with guests because it shows that we are engaged and that we care about that conversation. It can become a habit for us sometimes to kind of keep our heads down either towards the tablet or down towards the POS screen, and we want to avoid that because our heads down the whole time, you know, shows we don't care, and it can really change the conversation just by looking up every now and then. So let's make sure that we're looking up at the guest as often as we can. Next is share a smile. I know with masks that it can seem really hard right now to do that because people can't see our mouths, but that's okay. They can see it in our eyes and they can see it in how we carry ourselves. Plus, Chick-fil-A is all about a positive atmosphere, and smiling adds that bright experience that sometimes people don't get outside of our business. You know, everyone's got a story, everyone has their own things that they are currently going through, you know, and I don't always know what that is. Maybe it's not my business to know what that is, but it is my business to make sure that every guest coming through those doors feels loved and welcomed when they come through. Sharing a smile is a really easy way to do that. Third is speaking enthusiastically, so we want to make sure that in addition to looking happy, we sound happy as well. You don't have to go over the top like I do in my Disney princess voice. You just have to sound pleasant, because speaking in a monotone voice when we're having conversations with guests can very easily be misread as rude or just uninterested or bored. And a monotone voice versus a very pleasant tone voice can definitely change the entire tone of the interaction. And I guarantee you, if you struggle with interactions with guests, sounding pleasant or trying to sound more pleasant while you talk can solve a lot of problems really fast, because again, people can misread things really quickly, and just by simply, I guess, lifting the end of your sentences, if that makes sense, as you talk, kind of like what I just did. It's a really easy way to sound enthusiastic while you speak. And then last is making connections. So this is probably the easiest to do up front. Positions like drive-through positions, since it's so fast, go, go, go. You know, we don't always have the time to stop and have conversations with guests or take time to really make those connections. Yes, we can, but front counter is the best place to do this, because you are up front, you're taking orders with guests, and it's kind of a little moment to kind of stop and slow down a little bit. We want to make sure that we make guests feel special by making their visit with us personal and remarkable. It's as simple as asking someone about their day, addressing them by name if you know it, asking if you can help with anything, a compliment, or anything really to make them smile. In the drive-thru, like I said, it can be harder, but up front it is expected of all of us to make sure that we are making connections with guests. In addition to guest interaction, so in addition to Core 4, we want everyone to feel welcomed as soon as they walk through our doors. So it is also expected of all of us that as soon as we notice someone walk in through those front doors, that we greet them by saying, "Welcome to Chick-fil-A." It's a great start to their visit, and it's a new habit that we all need to get back into doing. It also helps us be more aware of what is happening up front. Again, we want to, we aren't used to guests being in the dining room, so it's important that we keep our head on a swivel, which basically just means that we are constantly checking front counter for any new guests that walk into our restaurant or walk up to the counter. So make sure that we are constantly looking up front, that we're constantly aware of where guests are and if they need your help. Some new terms that some of you may not know is first, second mile service. Second mile service essentially means that we want to do what we can to go that extra mile for guests and to make their visit amazing with us. Whether it's clearing their table for them, getting them beverage refills, Supermom cookies, or getting any extra utensils, sauces, whatever they need so that they don't have to stand up themselves from their table. We want to try to go out of our way for them, especially for those we call high needs guests, which is another new term you may not know. So a high needs guest are those that need a little extra attention while they're with us. So that would include the elderly, the disabled, and parents with kids, especially if it's just a single parent with kids. Oftentimes they've got their hands pretty full with a bunch of other stuff, and we want to make sure that their experience is as stress-free as possible. So some ways to help out our high needs guests are simple things like holding the door for them. You know, sometimes you've got moms or dads coming in with baby carriers and they've got other kids on their arm that they're trying to get into the restaurant. You know, so rushing over to hold the door for them, or you've got people with walkers, people with canes, wheelchairs, crutches, whatever it may be. Holding that door open for them is a really good first impression and a really good start to their visit. If you see a parent walk in and they have small kids, we can offer to bring them a high chair to their table. High chairs are located in the back right corner of the restaurant. Normally, we ask guests to wait at the counter for their beverages, but for high needs guests, we want to, again, go that extra mile. So we can tell them they can go take a seat, we'll finish the beverages, and we can bring it to their table for them. So then they don't have to worry. And just anything we can do to just give them some extra love. One super important thing about high needs guests as well is how we mark their orders. So similar to marking orders outside, if they have to pay with cash or if they have to still pay at the cash cart, you know, we want to mark it with a star if it's a high needs guest. So again, elderly, disabled, parents with kids, mark their orders with a star. Make sure that we get the guest's name and make sure that we put in clothing descriptions so then it's easy for us to pick it out. Because right now, the way that we're serving food is everyone's getting food in a to-go bag. We're just calling guests by names and they're coming up to the front counter to get the food themselves. But with high needs guests, we want to deliver it to their table for them. So again, they don't have to worry about anything. They can just order, sit down, we'll take care of the rest. Though if you are bagging front counter, your goal as a front counter bagger, especially when there's people ordering in up front, is to try to get at least 80% of your orders to the guest while they are still at the counter. Moving on, we do what we call table touch-ins. This is when we check in on our guests who are seated in our dining room. We like to do these every 15 minutes or so. It can be as simple as approaching a table and asking how everything is for them and if we can get them anything else, similar to how a server might at a sit-down restaurant. Or you can use visual cues to ask more specific questions. If you notice that they're finished eating, you can ask, "Can I clear your table for you?" With guests' permission, you can then take their trash and then throw it away for them. I know it may sound weird, but we want to avoid using words like garbage or trash. This all ties back into language of hospitality, which again, language of hospitality is basically just using a more elevated language while we're talking with guests at work. So things like saying "my pleasure" is a huge one instead of "you're welcome," saying "beverage" instead of "drink," saying "dine in" or "carry out" instead of "for here to go." And so on. So trash and garbage is another one, and we want to avoid that. If you want to ask to throw something away, just ask if you can clear their tray for them or clear their table for them. If you notice their drinks are empty, you can ask to refill or refresh their beverage. This is something, if you're not used to working at Chick-fil-A, we used to be able to do all the time. Just make sure that if a guest wants their drink refilled for them, that they are taking off the lid and the straw themselves. This is for sanitation reasons. We do not want to come in contact with that lid or that straw. Especially with COVID right now, we really don't want to come in contact with it. Otherwise, we have to replace the lid and the straw, so just make sure that the guest removes those. They hold on to it, and then you go refresh that beverage for them. We can fill guest drinks as many times as they like with whatever, even lemonade, if they originally bought a lemonade. If they did not originally buy a lemonade, then we cannot refill their beverage with lemonade. That is super important. But like sodas, teas, we can refill all of those. The only exception to refilling beverages for is any of our specialty drinks, which at the moment we don't have, or like any of our iced coffees. You know, those don't come with refills. And a final example of table touch-ins is asking if a guest would like a mint. We will have some mints up at the front counter station, condiment station. Make sure that we are handing them out to guests and that they are not grabbing their own mints. Again, we do not want to spread germs, so a bunch of random people's hands in that mint jar, super bad. We just want to hand it to them. Remember, especially with table touch-ins and taking orders, this is your time to make conversation with guests. You know, make them feel welcomed, cared for, and special while they eat in with us. This is the most important part of working any front counter positions. Again, like taking orders or just hospitality. All right, next let's talk about taking orders. Majority of you should all already have a good understanding of how our POS system works and how to take a basic order. Difference there is how you end an order. So some of you may have not tendered an order before. That's basically mean taking cash, taking money. This is how you do that. When finishing a front counter order, you've gone through all the steps of clarifying the order, repeating it back, making sure it's correct. Then we'll want to determine whether it's dine-in or carry-out. Normally, without COVID restrictions, we could hit dine-in or carry-out, and we would give them a table marker. However, right now, with COVID restrictions, we aren't going to worry about that. We will, however, worry about hitting carry-out on an order. Carry out, and if you notice at the top it'll say carry out. Even as soon as I type in anything and I haven't hit one of these yet, it'll pop up with this screen that says dine in or carry out. Please make sure that we hit carry out. And if you haven't at that point done it yet, just make sure you hit it up here, carry out. Once you've hit carry out, you've determined that this is everything correct, and we're finishing up the order. Down at the bottom, you'll hit tender. Once you hit tender, it takes you to this screen. So this is very similar to taking orders outside. We want to do the same exact thing as making sure we get a guest name, but we also, instead of a car description, we want to get a clothing description. So you can hit right here where it says clothing shortcuts. Just kind of look at the person and whatever they're wearing, put it in. It doesn't have to be super detailed. Like, let's say for example, Aubrey was who I put in, then I would just put in purple, probably blouse, purple blouse, and then they would know who I'm talking about. It's super important to make sure that we're putting in clothing descriptions, just because it makes it a lot easier to find them, especially if we have high needs guests. So anyone that's considered a high needs guest, and remember that's going to be elderly or parents, especially like single parents with their hands full, or anyone with disabilities, we want to make sure that we're giving them extra attention and that we are marking them as a high needs guest. Easiest way to mark them as a high needs guest, put a star by their name and then type in their name. We'll put in Aubrey because she was my example. So make sure that's marked. That star signifies that we have to take that order to their table. So especially if we're taking that order directly to their table, please make sure that we are putting in a clothing description. It makes it so much easier. So then you'll finalize the order and then you'll come to this screen. Now some of you guys have dealt with this before, some of you haven't. If it's a card payment, just make sure this quick tender is up, and then once they insert their card, the system will do everything else for you. If it's cash payment, then you'll have to hand type it in. So if they hand you just a single 20, a 10, or a 5, you can just hit one of those. If they hand you exact change, you can hit that. If they give you anything else though, you can hit go back, and then you can hand type in whatever it was they gave you, and then you can hit cash up at the top. And then right here in yellow, it'll tell you what the order total is and how much you have to give back. The register will open and then you'll hand back the change. If you are unsure how to hand back change, a good rule of thumb is to just make sure that you're giving it back in the highest amount possible. So like if someone had $10.25, best way to give it back to them is a $10 bill if you have it. If you don't, 2 5s are fine. And then like a quarter, you know, you don't want to do 2 dimes and a nickel. Do it. Biggest denominations makes it easier for the guests. If you are taking a guest orders up front, then it is your responsibility to make that drink for them before they leave the counter. Again, the only exception for that is high needs guests. High needs guests are welcome to go sit down. You can finish that drink and then bring it to their table for it. However, do not just take an order and then move on to helping someone else. If they have beverages on that order is not complete until you have finished making all their drinks. Give it to the guest and then you can move on to helping someone else. Make sure that you are responsible for making those drinks. It makes it so much easier for the runner. It makes it so much easier for front counter bagger if you get those drinks done. So please make sure that is your responsibility. Complete the drinks for the guest. And finally, I want to talk about cleaning. So if there are no orders to be taken, no food to be run, and all the guests have been talked to and are good, the next thing you will focus on is the cleanliness of the dining room. As Matt likes to say, we want the dining room to look magical. I wish I was good at editing and I could add the words magical, but I'm not, so just pretend. There is a list of priorities when it comes to cleaning that you will constantly just be cycling through. First thing to check when it comes to cleanliness is how clean the tables are. We want to make sure that all the tables are wiped down after someone sits at it. Under the hand washing sink, there is a red bucket with a towel in it. You can use this to clean up any drink or sauce messes on the tables. Then go over it with the sanitizing Purell spray to kill any germs, because even though that bucket of water is sanitizer, it's not effective against killing any COVID germs. So just use that for sticky messes. Otherwise, you will just be using the Purell spray, and you can use some paper towels to wipe down the tables to make sure that everything is fully sanitized for guests. I like to go through and straighten out tables too, because as guests move and get up, they like to kind of move around the tables. So just make sure that we're straightening all the tables and benches since they are free moving, so that everything looks nice and orderly. Because if all the tables and chairs are in disarray, it can make the restaurant look 100 times more dirty than it actually may be. So let's just make sure we're helping keep that dining room nice, orderly, and aligned. You can also wipe down the benches and chairs. If you notice there's a bunch of crumbs on them, let's make sure that we do that. Even make sure to get those little crevices in the benches to get all those crumbs out. If you're using a wet towel, so again, that towel from underneath the sink, don't go from wiping a table to a seat and then back to a table, because this looks really bad to guests. Make sure you are checking the high chairs in the back as well. Those counts as wiping down chairs. Those need to be wiped down, sanitized after every use. And if we're able to, I'll have to check in the back to see if we even have these in stock. We probably most likely do though. We want to make sure that each chair has a child placemat and then 2 of those sanitizing wipes, those little packet Purell ones, in each of the chairs. If tables and benches are all good, then you can go into sweeping. Sweep every part of the dining room, even under all the tables, because they can get very crummy. There can be a lot of food on the floor sometimes. From there, once sweeping is done, then you can go into sanitizing all commonly touched areas like door handles or the countertops. Next, we can spot clean the windows. You don't have to wipe the entire window, just spot clean any spots that look like they have fingerprints or any sticky parts on it. Especially pay extra attention to our front doors and even that side back door that people enter through, because the doors are the first thing guests see when they walk in. It's their first impression. We want to make sure that it's a good one. Let's make sure to check the trash compactors every half hour or so just to see how full they are. Once they get full, let's change them. If you don't know how to change them, this is a brief description about how to do that. So when doing the trash compactors, make sure you grab the key, turn it if you don't already know. It'll say door open. Then all you have to do is push this open and pull the trash out. When you're taking the bag out, make sure that you double knot it. And then when you put the bag in, you pull it all the way down. So make sure this is down, but pull the bag all the way down around the side. And make sure that the end of it is folded up like this all the way around. The reason why it's important to make sure that it's folded up like that all the way around is so then when we stick it back in the trash compactor and it starts compacting, that it won't take the bag with it. Then let's make sure that we check and clean as it's needed, though we do have to fully clean the restrooms every 3 hours, and again whenever it's needed. Josh created a cleaning procedure for the bathrooms, and that list is located in that back pantry area. We need to make sure that we're following that list and doing as many items as we possibly can on that to make sure the bathrooms are clean for everyone. Again, we want the dining room and the restrooms to look magical. However, please remember that guests are our first priority. So even if you are in the middle of cleaning or stocking, if a guest walks in or if a guest walks up to the counter and needs your attention, immediately stop what you're doing and run over to help them. Run over to their table or race up to the counter to help them, because they are our #1 priority, and I cannot stress that enough. Guests always take precedence over everything, you know. They are #1. Stop what you're doing, go help them. They need you more than anything. If any one of you remember orientation with me, I did briefly go over what we call guest perception, which means that we want to think about what guests are seeing when they come into the restaurant. Anything that would make a bad impression, we want to avoid. So cleaning plays a huge role in that. We want to keep that dining room spotless for them. So in addition to the list of cleaning procedures, that includes little things as well, like making sure that the counter is clear, that we don't have boxes piled up on it, or even that we don't have empty boxes piled up by the side of the drive-thru. That's a bad habit I've noticed we've started doing. We need to stop that. This also heavily deals with how we act when we are in the restaurant. We are so used to not having guests in our dining room, and because of that, we can act a little extra crazy. But now we are more visible to guests than we've ever been before, so we need to make sure that we are acting appropriately. Let's make sure that we aren't being too loud. We can't be having inappropriate conversations around guests. We shouldn't be talking about guests while we are anywhere in the drive-thru or up front, because you never know who's listening. We also want to make sure that we're watching how we conduct and carry ourselves, because this all goes towards guest perception. And then finally, I promise I'll sum it all up in a moment, but if you are up front, I know you will have moments where you feel like you have nothing to do and it's just impossible to find something to go and keep yourself busy with. But I guarantee there is always someone to help, and there is always something to clean. You must stay busy. Do what you can to stay busy, and this is the highest expectation we have of everyone, and this is expected of you no matter the position you are in. Please make sure that you are staying busy. I don't want to look up front and see people just standing behind the counter doing nothing, because I will immediately help you find something to do. Stay active, stay moving, stay busy, and most importantly, unless someone asks you for something directly, and I'm getting close because I cannot stress this enough. Unless someone asks you directly, stay out of the drive-thru. Stay out of the drive-thru. Do not huddle around front counter bagging if you are not a runner, if you are not the bagger, or if you are not in the drive-thru. Unless you need to get like a lemonade or something, or even tea, do not step one single foot into that drive-thru. I will tell you immediately to get out of the drive-thru. You need to be in the dining room. You need to be up front. There are 100 other things you are paid to be doing in that moment, and standing around the drive-thru, getting in the way of things, is not one of them. So please, I cannot stress this enough. Stay out of the drive-thru. Be up front. Be happy. Be helping people. Do not be in the drive-thru if you are not needed there. All right. If you've done everything that I've just went over, the last thing you can do, and if there's nothing else to do, is stocking. Stock your ice, stock your cups, stock that condiment station. But I will also emphasize that stocking is your absolute last priority. Guests always come first, cleaning always follows after, and stocking is your last resort, unless you're in dire need of something. If you're out of cups, if you're out of ice, that's gonna heavily affect you, especially when a bunch of people walk in. So of course, make sure those are stocked up and good, but don't spend the main part of your time worried about that, because guests don't care how stocked things are right there, because they don't really see that. That doesn't affect the guest experience. How we're interacting with them and the things that we're doing for them and how good the food is and stuff like that affects the guest experience, but stocking doesn't really. So make sure that we're putting majority of our effort and time out in the dining room cleaning or helping guests. All right, and that's it. Again, just to summarize real quick, when you're working up front in our front counter order taking position or hospitality, make sure that we are putting guests first. Guests are our top priority, that we're having good interactions with them. We're doing what we can to go out their way to make sure that their experience with us is remarkable. Make sure that we are taking orders accurately, that we are keeping the dining room clean, and then again, that stocking is last priority. Probably fourth point, stay out of the drive-thru. I can't emphasize that enough. But if you guys have any questions at all, feel free to reach out to me or any of the other directors or team leads. The nice thing is that majority of us have all been here before COVID, so we are pretty well versed in how this works, and we do have a lot of team members as well that have been with us since before COVID, so they do have a good understanding with this. You know, pay attention to this video, watch it again if you need to make sure you got everything down. Again, we do have a lot of staff, and we'll have team leads around that know how this works, so they can help you, so then you're not just thrown into it. I want to make sure that there's plenty of people around that know what they're doing to help you guys that maybe are still learning this position, to make sure that everyone has got it down, and we can mark that off on your training. So I love you guys. Have a good one. Dining room being open is going to be awesome.